Project management world, welcome to Project Insight's professional development series. Today we are talking about project scheduling. Whether you're tuning in from the highest skyscraper or your home base, get ready to power up your project management skills. A few housekeeping items. All participants will be on mute. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat and say hi now if you care to. This PM will be valid for one PDU. The trick is you must stay until the end of the session in order to scan the code. You'll be sent your certificate before the end of the week. Please do use this webinar link to access the recording in the future. Before we start, though, let me introduce you to our experts. First up, we have the Superman of PM strategy, Steve West. Steve has helped thousands of organizations make their work easier as the founder and CEO of Project Insight. Project Insight is an award-winning online project management tool. Our mission is to automate your work, unify your data, and make your life easier. If you're not currently using our platform, please reach out. We'd love to work with you. Alongside Steve, we have the master of milestones, Diane Buckley-Oise. Diane is a seasoned PMP and author, directs core performance concepts. As always, we are extremely fortunate to be learning from you both. How are you both doing?
Doing great.
Wonderful.
All right.
Well, let's do this scheduling. This
is
is
one of your new shirt there, Steve.
Yeah, we have new shirts and we're ready to go through scheduling. It's so important. It's one of the most important parts of project management.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So today during our webinar, and thank you everybody for joining us today, we're going to cover a lot of topics, a lot of conversation in the next 40 to 55 minutes. And so please feel free to, put your questions in the chat and we'll try to answer them as we go along. But we're going to talk about what the importance of scheduling is and, how you define the work that needs to be done. We are going to kind of talk a bit about, the differences between Waterfall and Agile and how they're very similar in many ways. We'll talk about how you determine the order of work, how you know when how long the activity should be, and ultimately finding that reality of a schedule, because we all know that, your clients, whether they're internal or external, they want to know when it's going to be done, right? When that project's going to be done. And you can't just give them and say, I don't know, you'll get it when you get it. Putting a schedule together is really, really important. And it also helps you monitor that project. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, having a good, strong schedule, there's a few people from Orange County, California here today. Having a efficient or scheduled in place helps your entire team be more efficient. So those are the things we're going to kind of tackle today. And let's kick it off, right, Steve?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So scheduling, how important is it? If we don't have a schedule, how are we communicating to all the people that are working on our projects what's going on? So having a good, strong schedule is going to really improve that communication. It also helps you manage those dependencies. We're going to spend a lot of time on dependencies today and how important they are. It allows us to monitor what's going on on our project, with a schedule, and it will absolutely improve that productivity. Steve, obviously Project Insight is a project management software. And at the core of it is its schedule.
Definitely. It's one of the first things when we built the tool. So the first thing we did was build a scheduling algorithm into the tool because that's what, everybody needs. If you think about projects, everybody always wants to know when it's going to be done, right? That's like the first thing that out of everybody's mouth, a customer or your boss, like executive management, whoever it is, they want to know when you're going to deliver it. And I think that this is probably one of the most challenging aspects also of managing a project is determining what the schedule is going to be.
Right. And without a good, strong schedule, you're going to miss things. You're going to have a lot of rework. You're going to be in a bit of a chaotic state. Yes, if you have a simple project, fine. But how many projects, we've talked about this before on these sessions, how many projects are using resources that are working on multiple projects?
Well, that's to this day and age, it's almost everybody's matrix organizations with resources across many different projects. It's quite a challenge, definitely.
Right.
We see it on almost all of our clients.
So let's talk about how we make a really good schedule. How about that?
Sure.
Well, the first thing to do is to understand what you're trying to do. And we've had conversations on charters in the past. If the charter is what tells you what it is we're trying to accomplish, what are those objectives, and what we want done to look like. That's what the really importance of the project charter is. And if you have a good, clear sense of what done is, you can start to identify all the smaller steps or activities that are part of getting to done. But it's not a simple process. How many times do you know everything on day one?
Never.
Yeah.
I mean, really never.
Right. And the process of decomposing is really important. Like even you may have resources on your project that have done similar projects for years. And those individuals, have a good inherent sense of what needs to be done. But what happens if you have a brand new person on that's doing that same role? So the taking the time to determine what needs to be done and being clear with that is really important as the basic and your building block of having a good schedule. And it's called decomposition. So we're going to do a couple terms here in this session today. So we're going to talk about decomposition. And some of you might be saying, well, that works really well from a waterfall standpoint where you're trying to define everything all at once. But that's not necessarily true. It applies also in an agile methodology. You're going to be identifying the work that you believe needs to be done. And you may not know it all at this point in time. And then you're going to organize that work into, here's these things are going to help us do this activity, or these things are going to help us achieve this goal, or these things we need to do. We know that we have to do them before we do these other, 3 things. So getting that organized in your head and with the entire team is what decomposition is all about. And even in an agile kind of method, that first process of identifying is all the stuff that goes into that backlog. And then what happens once you have that backlog, right, Steve?
Well, I mean, it ultimately if you think about, I know like we throw all the agile terms out and waterfall, and sometimes it gets really religious, just like, software. But at the end of the day, if you're saying in this sprint, we're going to do this, and then in that sprint, we're going to do that, and then in that sprint, even if you're not planning out the entire cycle, normally most customers I work with do at least 2 or 3 sprints ahead. That's scheduling.
Absolutely. It's decomposition, right?
Right. Basically, it's what you're
Yeah.
talking about. So I think
okay.
Yeah, I just think it's important to recognize that this is independent of which methodology you're using. Thinking through how hard something is, how long it's going to take, can it fit into this sprint, or can it fit into this phase, is almost the same exercise.
Right. And I always try to term it as the waterfall is methodology is more about trying to get the entire effort defined in advance.
Yeah.
When you talk about agile, you're trying to define a sprint in advance. And you're going through the exact same thought process. It's just more iterative. You're doing, like you said, maybe 3 at a time, planning 3 of them at a time, because you're going to learn and you're going to do your retrospective, and then you're going to apply what you learned into those subsequent sprints. So it's just much more iterative. It's just not, you're not expecting to kind of swallow the whole thing up front.
Yeah.
It's a micro waterfall. It's your little offlet, that's coming off the side of it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we were just saying, it's like you're looking at you're still looking at the whole project. You're identifying those major activities. You're dividing them up into smaller tasks. You're brainstorming with your team. You're throwing them into the backlog, and then you're going to continue to update as you learn more. So
and the interesting thing too is that we always think like that agile is limited just to project manage or to like software development. Even that's where it's obviously most popular. there's no reason why you couldn't try to build out your waterfall project and then still in the context of that develop a sprint to get through some of the smaller chunks of work you're doing.
Yeah, and absolutely, absolutely. And then even in your world, in the development world, you're combining a lot of concepts between waterfall and agile together. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too.
Sure.
So again, a couple more definitions. We talked about decomposition, work breakdown structure. Again, it's organizing how all the work rolls up into the final product. Deliverable, what are we actually delivering? And then dependencies, which are really going to be important as we move into developing a really strong, comprehensive schedule. This gives you a little bit of idea. We're not going to get into too much detail, but a work breakdown structure is like an org chart. It just kind of rolls everything up. And even, you're going to have the different components of your project. You're going to have the work that needs to be done that roll up into those components. And, it gives you a nice visual of all of the deliverables that are going to be done. It gives you also an opportunity to talk to your team and make sure you got everything covered. And again, you still may not know all the details. You still may continue to do decomposition, but you want to make sure that you've gotten all the major components covered as early as possible in the project.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's what the sticky note process also, I've seen people use that for the decomposition, those kinds of different ways to do that. Oh.
Absolutely. Now, so once you have the work defined, now the biggest problem is to say, okay, how do I organize it? What do I need to do first? And so that's what we call sequencing. So you're going to have to identify things that need to be done before other things. You're going to identify things that need to be done after other things. And you're going to also identify things that can be done in parallel because there's no dependency. So dependency and sequencing are probably, in my opinion, one of the most important things to do as part of your schedule. We were talking about it, Steve, earlier. A lot of times people, when they're doing their schedule, they put a date is when this task needs to be done.
Right.
But it's really even more important to say this task drives the start of another task, or this task I can't finish until another one finishes. So those different relationships and making sure you understand that you're going to do it in whether it's agile or waterfall, you're still going to identify what needs to happen first and what needs to happen subsequently.
Yeah, definitely.
And so when you do that, you're building a schedule that will flex. And like I said, don't put definitive dates in when something's going to be done. You've worked on sprints a ton, right?
Mm-hmm.
Many times you're able to finish a task within a sprint, but there are times when they're not, right?
Right.
And let's say you planned that task A and task B were going to be done in sprint 1, and then task C starts when task A is done. And if for some reason you didn't get A and B done in that sprint, doesn't mean you're going to start task C in the second sprint. So knowing those dependencies will help you schedule the work for each sprint because you've built that into the project.
Right.
So as an example, rather than task A and task B, you got like volunteers must be trained before the gates are open, to the event. So if you're doing an event and you have volunteers, what's the worst thing you can do is throw the volunteers out there and not give them training?
Right.
That's kind of a recipe for chaos, not a recipe for success, right?
No.
So, I just got done with an arts festival, and, it was a 2-day arts festival, and we have a couple hundred volunteers. And if you don't have volunteer coordinators that are training people and, in advance of the arts festival, it's not going to be a successful arts festival because people won't know what they need to do. from a software standpoint, the obvious one is you have to have software developed before you can start testing, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and a lot of times
what happens when you start testing before the software is done?
Well, you pass.
Or you're either gonna pass or you're gonna have a lot of flags, right? It's one or the other. Lots of bugs or lots of passes.
But even there, like, when you're doing software, one thing happens after the other, and this exercise is really important because we're going to get to this, when you build the schedule and you want to shift something, then you don't have to manually change all the dates all the time. That's where we're driving towards.
Absolutely. And like like with the issue with the software, I've done software development for years, and if you don't know what the expectation of done is, let's use those terms, you're going to start testing something thinking that maybe there's a feature that should have been done. But if you didn't know that it wasn't supposed to be done, then you're going to be throwing bugs back. And that's going to be wasting people's time. So again, we're going to tie this all back to efficiencies. The more we spell out what work is to be done that we all agree on, and if we all agree on the order of the work to be done, we're going to be much more efficient when we get down the road to make sure that we're not making assumptions that we shouldn't have made. So having that schedule and having that charter, having that schedule, everybody understanding and taking the time to learn that schedule is super, super important.
Definitely.
And then, there's different kinds of dependencies. There's mandatory dependencies, ones that have to happen. There's discretionary dependencies, some that, optional. So as a project manager, you've got the opportunity to make a dependency or not have a dependency when it's discretionary. We've got internal dependencies, maybe resources. Maybe you're waiting on a resource to be freed up from another project before a task can start. That's an internal dependency. And you might have external dependencies. Maybe you're waiting for the client to sign the contract before you get started on an additional feature. There's so many different types of dependencies that you need to understand them and be able to apply them appropriately. Steve, do you want to show maybe some dependencies and how we do that in Project Insight?
Yeah, sure. One of the easiest ways to see dependencies is, there we go. One of the easiest ways to see dependencies, I'll zoom that in just so everyone can see, is on a Gantt chart. And, here I have a real basic Gantt chart. You can still see dependencies on our task list here where we have our predecessor column. You can do it by putting the number in. A lot of times it's easiest to have the predecessor, the first task, and then below it, the next task and the next task and the next task. You can do that here, or you can just use a Gantt chart and, draw them dependencies this way by drawing lines between the tasks. And then that's, then you can see here we have this nice waterfall. This task happens, then that task happens, then that task happens. So this is a real nice representation of a timeline with all of your work breakdown structure in a sequence. And this is a real simple case. A lot of times you'll have relationships where they both need to start at the same time, and you can do that with Project Insight and by doing what's called a start to start or a finish to finish. So if you're looking at tools, make sure you can see, I'll refresh this, that the tool can actually handle these different kinds of relationships. The most common is the first task finishes, the next one starts, but a lot of times you might have two tasks that start at the same time. And sometimes you have it where they finish at the same time. And then there's the craziest way is the first one finishes and the first one starts and the second one finishes, which is kind of backwards. But make sure you see that your tool you're going to use can do all those different things.
That's great. And I love the fact that you can just kind of drag and drop them. So like, if you want to go back to that view, Steve, real quick.
Oh, the Gantt chart? Sure.
Yeah. Because, let's say assume things changed and
Yeah.
the second one down, that green one, didn't
Yeah.
finish when you wanted it, and you automatically roll that into the next sprint. Well, now you know that the subsequent tasks can't be done in this sprint because you have to finish
Right.
that second one. So even in this view,
Yeah.
you can visualize the things that are coming from the backlog into the next sprint.
Right. I mean,
And
if
if
you need
you
to shift something, and this, let's say this task moves, then everything just shifts with it, right? If we need to move it another week, that's the benefit of doing this, is that you can have your whole schedule shifted and, dragging these
and I know
predecessors around.
I don't know about you, but sitting through a 3 hour worth of backlog grooming is never a fun thing to do either. So if you've got it already planned,
Here it is. Here are the
Right.
things you must do to get to these other future states,
right,
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And we
Um,
we also have a Kanban style tool as well, where here are the tasks that, if you need to, these are all still linked together, but I can move a task here and then have things shifted around this way as well. So this is a different kind of way of scheduling, is that you could actually do predecessors, and you can do these Kanban style, or you can do a mixture of them together. So
that's
it's not just one or the other.
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um,
That
the
that's
other
one of
thing,
my things
oh, go
that I
ahead.
like. Sorry, Diane, to cut you off, but I think the hybrid thing's so nice because look, there's three of us, and we can each be on a different screen
Yeah.
in our flow that makes the sense in our brain, but it's still the collective,
Hmm.
gets the output that we need, which is no 3 hours of grooming anything, right? We can just see what it needs to be. So
Hmm. Definitely. But I think the real key, getting back to what we're talking about earlier, is taking the time to sync, to put the relationships between the tasks is a worthwhile exercise, especially also if you're using templates, so that, if your whole entire project shifts, you don't have to a lot of tools are out there like Excel or other things. You might have a schedule and tasks, but you end up putting all the dates down, and then you end up, as a project manager, you end up wasting your time, like putting in all the dates. Oh, these dates all change. If you have a big project that has hundreds or even 1,000 tasks in it, you really don't want to be manually updating the dates of each of the things as you go. So really taking the time to build the work breakdown structure, breaking it down, decomposing, which Diane was talking about. It's a really worthwhile exercise. And a lot of times, like, new clients of ours, they don't do a lot of this, and they do it the hard way. So
Yep, and we don't want to do it the hard way at all.
no.
All right, so you want to give me control back there, sir?
Yep.
All right. So dependencies are super important, and we just went through a couple different views. This is just kind of the manual view of seeing each of the line items in your schedule and what those dependencies are. Again, a network diagram showing those dependencies. We see that Project Insight can do it in many different ways and keep those connections. The other thing that I know Project Insight can do really well is be able to combine a schedule that is a sprint based schedule with maybe a waterfall based schedule. And,
Yeah.
if you have like your engineering department that's doing work that is more sprint based, and then your project is waiting for the completion of that sprint based work, having those dependencies will tell you when you can start your your more waterfall based work.
Yeah, definitely. And like you just mentioned, the blended methodologies. It has been our philosophy for a long time to have blended methodologies. And I think the example you're talking about is, if we're onboarding clients with, training and meeting with them and implementing, that tends to be a waterfall project. And then sometimes there's development items that come out of that. Well, our developers are on a whole different schedule. They've got the releases, and that's, you know, what they're doing. And one of the cool things that we've done with Project Insight is allow for those sprints that the dev team is working on to pull from multiple different projects, whether they're waterfall or otherwise. So, you can actually have one team that's got their own schedules going on, and then your other team in doing the waterfall, and you don't have to have two different tools and two different project plans for that. You can actually have tasks in the waterfall project get associated to the sprint that the developers are looking at. And then because that sprint has, a start date and an end date, any successors tasks that of things that are in that sprint will get shifted automatically. Like if you put it in that sprint next week, then the subsequent tasks will shift automatically. We have clients that come to us that they're doing this in two different systems. They're doing it in Excel, and then they got Jira or DevOps or something like that. That's why we integrated with all those tools and made it so that you don't have to have two different things and double enter everything and monitor different project schedules. It's really challenging. And I
Yeah.
think this is not a unique situation.
No, it's absolutely not, and that's a really powerful capability of the product, because nobody works in a very waterfall environment anymore. It's pretty much everywhere is hybrid. So having those dependencies, and again, we're harping on a lot of this dependency piece, because that's kind of the critical part of keeping an efficient process in place. The other part that we're going to talk about next is about effort and duration, and how important it is to really understand the effort, which is, if you were doing, a particular task, and all you were doing for, all day long, and that task took you 10 hours, you'd have it done in like a day and a half, right?
Mhm.
But we all know that we get interruptions, we have other things, we have meetings, so when we talk about the difference between effort and duration, effort is that specific amount of time it would take for somebody to do, they started it and finished it all in one setting. Duration is how long it's really going to take you from a calendar standpoint.
Yeah.
Both of them require that you understand the skills of the people that are doing it. So if you've got a new engineer, are they going to be more, is it going to take longer effort or less effort than the more experienced engineer?
More effort.
More effort.
Right.
And more duration.
And probably more duration. However, that new person might just be given that and focused on that. So that, it could be different. It could be different. You just never know. But having that conversation about what the effort is for the resource that you're using, and then what that actual duration is. So what do you think we should be putting our schedules together based on?
Well, both.
Well, both, but from a scheduling standpoint, that duration. If I estimate that's going to take 8 hours to do something, but it really is going to take that person a week because of everything else going on, I'm being way too optimistic to do my schedule based on effort. I need to be doing my schedule based on duration. But we need to capture both. And we need to capture both because we want to know whether or not we delivered within the time frame we thought we were going to, because everything is about retrospective. What did we learn? How long does it really take to do a task? I see a lot of companies that don't do that follow-up loop. And so what ends up happening is people keep estimating the way they're always estimating. They never know that it's wrong.
Right.
So the concept of effort and duration are very important concepts to put into your planning when you're identifying those tasks and the dependencies and the overall schedule.
Well, and I think another really important part of this is if your people that you're using in your project, if your resources are dedicated to your project, this exercise is a lot simpler. If your resources are matrix doing many different projects and juggling other responsibilities, then it gets even more challenging because you maybe don't have external impacts, shown on your schedule, but you have to bake it in by giving extra duration, like you talked about.
So we can ask the audience how many people have the luxury of having dedicated resources of their project.
No, I mean, who doesn't? I mean, everyone. If you say who does, you're going to get nobody.
Yeah.
But I don't know. In today, there's hardly any companies that we work with that have projects that have dedicated resource. Sometimes they do because there might be like in the field doing something and they're really only going to be doing one thing at a time. But anybody in the office software, IT, engineering, any professional type of work, normally you're on many different projects and many different things going on, and it's really chaotic and crazy. So we have some good advice on that.
I mean, that's why people come to a tool like ours, right, Steve? Is that instead of having 1,200 Excel files that you're managing, here it all in one exact central location, right?
Well, you definitely need to have some visibility across your portfolio if you can. That's really a big deal. But while you're building a new schedule, some of your resources might be dedicated and others aren't. So depending on who you're going to assign it to, you might give more duration. Like Diane said, I think for the companies that have many resources on many projects, giving more duration is helpful. And also, I think from a scheduling standpoint, when it is that way, it's helpful to just, I personally like to say, okay, well, I'm going to give them 5 days or 10 days and give nice round durations and not try to like go down to the day or anything like that. Just give them the whole week to do an 8-hour task or even a 4-hour task.
And
If you
that is
can.
one benefit to the sprint process too.
Yeah.
If you think about it, because if you're doing 2-week sprints, you're really giving people kind of a block of time to get it done. Even if it's 8 hours worth of work, by the end of the sprint, we're expecting you to do these 4 things of 8 hours, and hopefully in 40 hours, you can get it all done. Right.
Yeah. No, well, and most sprints are more than a week. So like 2-week
Right.
period, you might give them 30-hour, let's say they're somebody that's not dedicated to projects and they have other things going on. You could give them 30 hours of work across the 2-week period to get all of that done, or 20 or something like that. And then if you have subsequent tasks, then it's safer in your schedule dates that you're communicating. You're going to be safer to in that scenario because you didn't say, well, they're going to have it done in 3 days, right?
Yeah, and it's
So
a balancing act too, right? Because
yeah,
you don't want to be overly
I know.
conservative and then have the schedule get way stretched out, but you also don't want to be overly aggressive and have it, set the wrong expectations and you have an upset, client kind of thing. But when we talk about this, I mean, the other thing that I love about Project Insight is that, by putting that effort, putting that duration, the duration is going to help us identify those dependencies and
Right.
and develop your Gantt chart. But the effort is what's going to give you a sense of how hard your people are working per se, and how much work is on their plate. So you can look at the capacity planning as well, all
That's
tied
right.
together.
That's right. I mean, we should, why don't we show that? There you go. So if you take the time to put in the duration and the work, and you don't have to be perfectly accurate. If you're relatively accurate, you're going to, you're going to be able to get a report like this, especially if you put if all the projects are in the system and the project managers are reasonably accurate. They don't have to be that close. You know, but things do need to be up to date. If tasks are behind and they're in the past, you need to move them forward. But you'll be able to see a report like this where you can see, well, Brett Favre is he's at capacity here. And then you can actually open up and see which projects and why, how many hours on this project is 35, 35, 35, and then we got 3, 3, and 3. So, this is just a simple example. But here we have a project there. We put 48 hours, and then we have these other two where Adam is busy here. That's why he's red. So you can get this information for basically for free in a Project Insight, or probably other tools too. But you can get this information for free if you take the time to say, here's how much effort this is across this hours, and everything's linked up. Then this will come out. And the reason, again, we look at it on a week by week basis here on purpose versus a day by day. You could look at it day by day in our tool, but I don't usually recommend that because a week by week allows more for that busyness across
Yeah.
projects, and then at the end of the day
The
you allow
natural
your
flow of
yeah you allow
activity. Yeah.
yeah and you allow the person to decide how they're if you're talking professionals like software developers, IT, consulting, all that kind of stuff. the person at the end of the day sees they have 10 things to do, and then they got to juggle it themselves, and you don't have to worry about that as a project manager. But that's why like a week by week, or some of our clients use month view, but I like week view because the weeks are nice and even.
I really like the date that we have the daily though, because you can get that granular for like we have manufacturers, right? So again, those blended teams, you have some teams who I am only working on that, that is that
Yeah.
dedicated kind of piece of that. And then you can get that level of granularity just by clicking which scale you want to see it at.
Yeah, and
And
not to steal into our capacity webinars, but in our tool, Project Insight, you can do both a bottom up where you have the WBS, which is what we're talking about today, and you can also in our tool put in a project where, like this one is called top down, where we just put in how many hours we think. There's no tasks yet, so you can actually compare that information in the same construct. That's just a unique thing. When you're roughing it out, you might put some people on it and say, 2020, 2020, and not have the WBS. But what we're talking about today is building out a bottom up WBS and having that roll up.
And if we take it in the context of what we were talking about on dependencies, the other really cool thing is that if you go scroll down to the Craig guy that was way over capacity, you could look at one of those tasks and you can say, maybe I'll move this one. And if you built your schedule based on dependencies, you can do those what ifs. Let me move this one. What does that do? And I can move it back. So having that comprehensive tool is super important. And again, it goes back to scheduling, putting a schedule together that you can manage and you can actually work on versus just something to put on the wall and measure to.
Yeah, and here I just drilled right into that project, so you can come in here and take a look at what's going on there. Or you can even drill right into like one of these tasks and then take a look at what's going on there and see, maybe we assign this to somebody else, maybe we change its predecessors, we check the dependencies. So you can look at this report right here and do all kinds of different things. So this is a way, once you put your duration and effort in, it's a way to see what that impact is into the future. So again, like a lot of our clients come here and if they're new to project management, they don't really know that the benefit, they don't know how to do that yet. Or, a lot of times we have to explain what the difference between the duration and effort is, but it's a very worthwhile exercise, especially if you do templates where you repeat the same things over and over again.
Absolutely. So why don't you send me back to my PowerPoint here, and let's talk about efficiency and effectiveness. So we talked about effort and duration, and now you can start seeing where, how having a really good schedule is going to make you be much more efficient in your organization. But efficiency is doing, and I apologize for the noise, I do. People just went all by. So efficiency is really about doing things well. Effectiveness is about doing the right things, right? So I can sit here and I can do a task really, really well, but I could be doing the wrong task, right?
Going this way.
But if I'm doing the right task at the right time, I'm being effective. So you really want to, your goal is to be effective. And within being effective, you want to be efficient. So you want to be able to do things well, but you want to do the right things. And so a schedule is what tells you what the right things are for you to be working on.
Yeah, this is I find this to be extremely challenging as well, especially in anything technical in nature. Picking the right things at the right time with the right resources is not easy.
No, absolutely not. And the symptom of this would be, have you ever been working on a task and all of a sudden realize, oh, I need so-and-so to put input on this task. So I go call so-and-so and you pull that person off of the thing that they're doing, which might have been the most important thing for the organization, but you didn't even think about that. So having a good schedule, having those dependencies, thinking through that makes the organization way more effective. And then each task you want to be efficient in.
Well, that gets back to at least having visibility. If you use a tool, having all the projects in there, you could look to see what they're doing and see, oh, they're working on, such and such initiative that we know the CEO is totally hot to trot on. You might change your mind about that interruption, or maybe find a different resource to help you answer that question. So
Yeah.
if you don't have if you have it in different separate files and separate spreadsheets, that's incredibly difficult to know.
And like we said, when we started this whole session, it's about communication. A scheduling is about communication. And what you want to have is you want productive folks. You want them to have more output and less input, right? So you want to be able to, the output needs to be maximized with the minimized input. That's the most productive you can be. So, the more, and it's kind of a, people always say it, it's like the more planning you do, the better off you'll be. And I think there is a video out there of this group literally put a house together in 2 hours from the ground up. Can you imagine putting an entire house? It was like a 3-bedroom house together with toilets and appliances and cabinets and everything else. And they were able to do it in 2 hours.
How did they let the concrete dry on time?
It was the quick set, it was like it was, yeah. They had a quick set in the way, yeah. I mean, but they did major planning.
Yeah.
They did weeks and weeks and weeks of planning to be able to build that house in 2 hours, to prove that planning does work and makes you more productive. I always laugh though. It's like, did somebody get like plastered into those walls or anything?
Hell.
All these people running around. It was a lot of people.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's pretty cool. And again, it's striking that balance. I mean, not everybody can do weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks worth of planning, like I was just saying, but it's making sure you understand what the scope, what's the quality level of your project that you need to deliver, who are your resource, what are your costs, what are the timelines, putting that together into this picture. And this picture is called a schedule, right? And then that schedule needs to be visual to people so that they can see and understand it. And if you have people that say, I don't need to know the schedule, just tell me what I need to do. That's a hard thing. You need to get people to understand that they are part of that scheduling process. And if they're not putting input into that scheduling process, we're going to make mistakes. So bottom line, we want schedules to improve our communication. We want schedules to help us manage those dependencies. As you saw, Project Insight, you slide a task over and the whole rest of the schedule moves. As things are getting complete, you can see the progress on your project and even anticipate any changes to those ending deliverable dates. And as we talked about just now, it's like the productivity, you add and you gain productivity by spending the time putting schedules together.
Yeah, definitely. And then you talk about monitoring, being able to just have visibility across your projects and who, what's behind schedule, what's coming up, how busy are your people right now, how busy are they going to be in a month. Those are really important things.
Absolutely.
Very difficult to know what those important dates are if you have them not on a schedule, right? Like, I don't know.
It's the date the client says it's supposed to be done, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Good luck.
I think Cherise said that they must have had the best resources. I think they're referring to the building that house real fast.
Oh,
they definitely don't have someone there that doesn't know what how to do the job.
Yeah, if you can just Google it, it's house built in 2 hours. It's relatively old now. It's probably from the 90s, but it's just pretty cool. How they did that, and it really kind of highlights the importance of putting schedules together and being able to deliver on what you said you can deliver on.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that brings us to closure, guys.
Yep. Any questions, feel free to throw it into the comments.